Enga mana, enga reo, enga rau rangatira o ngā hau e whā. Tēnā koutou katoa. Nē rata mihi motohaki ki te kingi tuheitia po tātou te whewhewhera te tuawhitu. Ka mihi hoki ki a tātou katoa I huihui mai nei I tēnei ahi pō. Nau mai, piki mai, tahuti mai. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our Kaupapa Korero talk this evening. My name is Bryony James. It's my great pleasure to facilitate our conversation and contribute very little more than acting as a sheepdog to our fine panelists. Our Kaupapa Korero talks are an intermittent series of public lectures and discussions that we lay on when an issue gets so topical we feel it would be interesting to have a discussion about it. And a university, when you get right down to it, should be exactly that place where our thoughts and ideas are taken out and brushed off for a good airing. To that end, this evening we have 4 amazing panelists who will each bring their own expertise and their own viewpoints towards the topic of artificial intelligence. But you, the audience, are a part of the discussion. And this is how you can get involved. So allow me to, oh, there we go. So we're going to invite audience questions after each of our panelists has spoken briefly to kick off. You can send your questions through this app called Slido. So all you need to do is use your phone, scan that code, which we're all used to doing thanks to the pandemic. Scan that code and you'll be sent off to Slido and you'll be able to put your questions in. Don't worry if you don't catch it now, it will pop up throughout the talk and again at the end, and you'll be able to jump on and send your questions through. It's my challenge today, I'm assuming there's going to be quite a few questions because this is a full house, which is wonderful to see. It's my challenge to feed those questions to the panelists. Now, these are academics, so it's entirely likely that they'll just get into a fight on their own and we won't have anything to do. But I'll see if I can I'll see if I can wrangle that as well. But you're not here to hear from me, you are here to hear from them. So without further ado, I will pass over to our first speaker. Our first speaker is Professor Mike Duke, who is the Dr. John Gallagher Chair in Engineering and our Dean of Engineering here at Waikato, and I'll just hand over to him.
Thank you, Bryony. Tēnā koutou, greetings everyone. My area of research is in agricultural robotics. So when we're talking about artificial intelligence in the bots versus beings, I'm going to talk about the bots bit. And everyone gets a bit worried about it. They're going, artificial intelligence, I think that's why there's a lot of people here. What's going to happen to us? What impact is this new technology going to have on our jobs? What dangers are we going to face in the future for our security? So what I'd like to do is just to give us a little bit of a wake-up call that if you went back in time, you went to the old factories in the 1930s, they were full of people doing mundane, boring jobs that none of us would want to do today. That's history. Of course, technology has moved on, and we no longer worry about that. We have robots that are, going to go back a bit. Technology failure. Hang on, we'll just let that run. Hopefully that'll work. So if we look at, we've looked at that technology. That's all history. We're now moving on to car technology, that's building cars. We've now got robots that are doing it. And the robots will do all the jobs of the humans with, there's no humans in that picture at all. So where we had thousands, now there's none, and it's all being done by robots. If you look at things like fruit grading, which is the classic New Zealand type thing you had to do, if you went back in time, it was done by people. Human brains are actually sitting there determining whether or not you should accept or pass or fail a bit of fruit. If you went to a New Zealand pack house, where you're looking at apples, you're not going to see rows and rows of people looking at apples, deciding whether they're good or bad. What you're going to see is machines like this. The blue box that you see has got all the conveyor of apples coming through. There are dozens of pictures taken of each apple. It's opened up. Artificial intelligence combined with algorithms are determining whether or not that apple is good or bad. As the apple goes down the line, it is then ticked off into a good apple, or right down to, if it's a bad one, down to the juicer end. That's all being done using a form of narrow artificial intelligence. So when you're around in the Hawke's Bay, or you're looking at different places where you've got pack houses, you're seeing behind those walls this type of technology, and it is a narrow form of artificial intelligence that's doing the job that humans used to do. That's the first thing. Yes, that's meant a lot of jobs went in that area, but they weren't jobs that people wanted to do. Moving on, what if we take all that technology, that clever cameras and the computer visions and the artificial intelligence, is it possible that we can take these types of robots and put them out into the fields where we'll actually see them doing things in orchards and vineyards? And this project, called the MaaraTech project, one that I'm involved with our partners, does exactly that. So we're trying to say, can we take all of that technology and combine it to have a machine that when it goes out into, say, a vineyard, will go to a place and perform a task that a human would do, including the thought processes behind what you're actually doing to it. And one of the classic ones is vine pruning, where you have to make a couple of cuts, well, about 5 cuts. If you get them right, you get a really good vine the next year with lots of good growth. If you don't, you get it wrong, you can muck it up for a few years. So with that, I was going to talk through how we can do that with a robot, but I had a chat with Archie, which is one of the robots we've been working on, and there's Archie, and Archie said that they would talk through how they would do this task. So here's Archie.
Hi humans, I'm Archie the robot vine pruner. Each year, every vine has 5 or 6 critical cuts that affect how grapes grow. It is very important for the vineyard owners to get this right. Instead of semi-skilled human pruners, they want us robots to do it, so they get consistently high-quality vines for less cost. This is how I do it. First, I drive myself to the row of vines to be pruned. My route and schedule have been pre-programmed by humans. To navigate, I use GPS combined with laser imaging, detection, and ranging. A special marker tells me when I have reached the vine to be pruned. I scan the vine with my computer vision and create a digital model of the vine. I then use artificial intelligence, AI, to identify the key features of the vine and their locations. Humans, who are experts in vine pruning, have told my programmers the rules for best pruning. The programmers combine the AI-derived vine features with the best practice rules. The output shows me where to prune on the virtual 3D vine. I then map it to the actual vine. I then go to the physical location and make the cuts, just like the experts want, every time. Unlike humans that use their hands to operate primitive tools like secateurs, I have my own, specially designed pruners, which is of course, much better. My pruned vines are as good as the best expert, and much better than semi-skilled humans. Also, I will work all day and all night, and never complain about my pay and conditions. Sorry humans, your days are numbered.
Well, Archie, I didn't expect, obviously Archie started off being quite a nice robot, and at the end was like, I don't really care about you humans, I'm better than you. And that's the sort of thing you can get really worried about. Well, to be honest with you, Archie is a robot that does need what we call narrow artificial intelligence to function properly. But unlike the video that I made, Archie is not conscious. He's not thinking like that at all. And it certainly isn't sentient. But Archie, robots like Archie, will replace jobs in New Zealand, just like we saw from the apple packing or from the factories. But there'll be different jobs. So it is going to have an impact. And I'll finish off, like I do in my lectures, discuss. Thank you. Thank you. Right, technical glitch at the beginning.
Thank you very much, Mike. Our next speaker is Dr. Amanda Williamson. Now, Amanda works for Deloitte as a manager in AI and data consultancy, but she also moonlights here at the university as a senior lecturer in the business school. Her research has always been related to artificial intelligence, so please welcome Amanda.
Thanks. AI is no longer a buzzword. We use it every day, and we come in contact with it when we unlock our phones with facial recognition, when we navigate across a city, and even when we look at what we want to watch on Netflix and we see recommendations for us. That's all AI. And it's also in industry. When we have diagnoses made, sometimes AI is behind that. And also the medications that are being made are often driven by AI. When we apply for jobs, our CVs are often being screened by AI. And now, when we write code, that can be done alongside AI. So it's having a huge impact on our lives. And I see the change that AI is driving as creating 3 big C's of change. The first C is job cuts. We've talked about that impact that it can have. The second is creation of jobs. And the third is the collaboration with AI. So often when we ask people how do they feel about AI, people are generally more optimistic than they are pessimistic on average. But when you ask why they are pessimistic, the number one reason is the loss of jobs. We can all see it. And current studies that are coming out and are quite new do show that there is a bit of reason for concern in that space. Around 19% of jobs will have over half of their tasks automated through AI. This is particularly in copywriting and in PR, and that's a very scary sight. But on the positive side, if we learn from the history of technology, it's very clear that jobs are not just lost in isolation. We also see a reinstatement effect happen where new jobs come in its place. And we have a whole new field of AI-related jobs now. I work with these people. These are the AI engineers, right? And even now, there are new jobs that you might have not even heard of before. Have you heard of this role, a prompt engineer? That is a real job that is advertised in New Zealand at the moment. And with this embracing of AI, there are huge productivity increases. So there was an interesting study that came out last week which taught an AI assistant how to help call center workers. And it demonstrated that call center workers who were at the lowest skilled workers were able to increase their productivity by 35%. And at the same time, they were able to increase the satisfaction of the customers on the other end of the phone, and it improved their retention. So this is an incredible thing for us all in our jobs, is to actually get these benefits of taking away those very mundane roles. And when we think about New Zealand and our special place in the world, it's a very interesting thing to ponder, because current estimates suggest that companies overseas are using AI to augment work. One estimate suggests that as much as 50% of companies are using AI right now in 2023. It's a huge boom that's been driven by generative AI. That's what drives things like ChatGPT. So it poses a question for us. What's the cost of not adopting AI? Particularly because AI has gone through a huge shift. It's now not just for the AI engineers. It's now for all of us. This year, we've seen AI become democratized. We can all engage with AI just using our natural language. And this means as well that AI is not just about high stakes, a self-driving car. It can also be a form of creative expression. So I love this quote: AI won't replace jobs. People using AI will replace people not using AI. I think this whole new movement is a call to arms for all of us, because AI is going nowhere. It's only going to increase. So our job is to stick with that trend and make sure that we're fluent in AI and we can use it to amplify our work as well. And a final note is that AI is an amplifier, both for productivity, as we've seen, and creative expression, but it can also be amplified for less positive things as well. This is particularly concerning as we look at things like deep fakes, where people can emulate the voice and the face of other people. And this has the potential for misinformation spreading, which is something we should all be worried about as we approach an election. But to end on a positive note, if we think about the biggest issues of our time that we're facing right now, this is pandemics, this is climate change. AI is likely to be part of our solution to those biggest problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda. Our next speaker is Professor Nick Agar. Now, Nick is a philosopher, and he wants you to be very afraid.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Enough of the sunny optimism. So, yes, we're all doomed. But I would say that. Anyway, tēnā koutou, and this is a fascinating chat so far. So I am going to introduce an element of fear. I want you all to be a bit scared. I'm a bit scared. But can you not be sort of deer in the headlights scared? Can you be creatively scared? Because I do think that when I look at ChatGPT, which is the technology that scares me, it's coming to my line of work. It's coming to any line of work where you're paid money to think hard and write about it. If that's your job, and it's lots of people, it's my job, well, ChatGPT, right now, it's great and rubbish. There are respects in which ChatGPT, which is basically this sort of amazing chatbot that, by the way, we created by using the internet and putting our hopes and fears on it, and some clever tech dudes said, thank you for saying that, people. Thank you for giving me 570 gigabytes of text that I'm going to train this bot on. Thank you. So we created it, we permitted it, we shared, which was what we were supposed to do. And, well, should I say we're screwed? We're not screwed, but we do have to think creatively about what we can become, because my way of being employed, if you find yourself competing on price with a machine, you're in big trouble. You may keep your job, you're not going to be well paid for it. So your job may remain, but expect to be poor. So why, sort of, when I look at sort of ChatGPT, what it's capable of, I mean, it conforms. I mean, what I'm worried about is a pattern that you see in lots of digital technologies, where they basically start sort of, as soon as a digital technology is okay, so, we saw this example in chess. So the people in the 90s would say, well, it can beat bad players, but it can't beat the best players. Whoa, digital technologies that get quite good, sort of okay, which is where ChatGPT is now, rubbish in some respects, but amazing in others, can rapidly improve. So check back 2 years later and find out how generative AI is there. They'll be predictably much better. So that means we need to have a response. And we need to have a response that basically is partly looks at us. So how do humans respond? How do you respond when a machine comes and starts doing your job, starts competing on price, saying, I can do what you do, slightly worse, but much cheaper? Well, look at what you do and find some other way to do it. There's loads of aspects of our humanity that we can double down on and respond. So sort of when I look at how ChatGPT has come to my line of work, academic philosophy, it's crap in some respects, but astounding in other respects. And I predict that it will get it. So here's a question. I mean, I think a lot of people, what do you say when a student submits work? And I'm going to rat on my kids. They're in Australia right now, but they are doing this. But this isn't going out to Australia. So their teachers tell them not to use ChatGPT, and they say, thanks, teacher, of course we wouldn't use ChatGPT. And then they go and use ChatGPT. And the teachers say, well, I've got this checker, this AI detector, I'll use that. And again, the kids are smarter than the grown-ups. They know how to get around that, and they do. So their teachers are basically reading a lot of automated bot-written text. And it's sort of that, if you're going to play this game of trying to sort of detect machine-written text, we're going to lose that because they will get better. So I tested it out, okay, with some writing that I think I should know, my writing. Nick Agar, I asked ChatGPT to write on something in the voice of Nicholas Agar, the philosopher, and I asked it to write on something that I had never written on. And I thought, whoa, it's not genius, but it looks like stuff I would say. It's got all of my quirks. In fact, it's got some good ideas. And I think that if we're telling the kids, if you use ChatGPT, I'm counting it as plagiarism, well, here's my question to you. Maybe I'll leave with this question. So if imagine I use one of those ideas, written in the voice of Nicholas Agar, that have my clumsy forms of expression. They look like the stuff I would write. If I plagiarize, I mean, this all comes from text. I'm on the internet. I've written stuff that's on the internet. If I plagiarize ChatGPT plagiarizing me, is that plagiarism? So I really want to know. I actually don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it's straightforward because it comes from me and it repackaged it to me. And now I want to use it. So I think we need big ideas and creative ideas about how we can respond. But thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I've scored a watch.
Oh, yes, good. I was supposed to be looking at that.
And our last panelist to talk this evening before we open the floor is Associate Professor Titaka Keegan, our computer scientist. Titaka has a lot to say about artificial intelligence, particularly in the context of te reo and Mātauranga Māori. Thank you, Titaka.
Kia ora Bryony, tira kia ora tātou katoa, koutou I konei I te pōnei, koutou e whakarongo mai, mai rungi te YouTube ānei, no reira, kia ora tātou katoa. There's a whole lot of things that I could say about artificial intelligence and how we can use it and how it could affect our jobs. But what I'm going to talk about is a couple of examples and a couple of thoughts that I've had. Artificial intelligence will affect us in a lot of different areas, but one of the areas of artificial intelligence that has got a lot of press recently, and probably for good reason, is, as Nick mentioned, ChatGPT. I gave a talk to a bunch of students, Māori students from Māori schools through a pūhono program recently, and I was getting them to try it out. We had ChatGPT running, and I was getting them to try it out. And I was getting them to ask some questions like, my mum keeps bugging me about doing the dishes, what can I say to her? And some of the responses that were coming back with were like, really good. I was thinking, geez, if I was that boy's mum and he said those things back to me, I'd maybe let him off the dishes. So then what I got it to do was to ask it some similar questions I roto I te reo Māori in the Māori language. And some of the language that was coming back was actually really good. Not all of these children could speak Māori, but this gave them an avenue to start learning to speak Māori. And it was so good, it was what I term scaringly good. And it's scaringly good for three main reasons. These are the three reasons I can think of for now. The first reason is, how does it know? How does it know to speak te reo Māori? Because I've got a good handle on where all the Māori language databases are throughout New Zealand, and I know none of them shared them with this overseas international company. And of course, the answer is it took all of its information from public resources and social media, right? So everything that's ever posted in social media, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, where this video is going to be posted, it can get access to that, it pulls it all in, it learns from it. So that's a little bit scary in terms of Māori data sovereignty. So we've got this movement at the moment, Māori data sovereignty, where Māori have control of their own data. And this is kind of the complete opposite of Māori data sovereignty. Māori have no control of their own data. So that's a concern. The second concern is, whether we like it or not, at the moment it's free. Eventually there will be a cost. Eventually the makers of ChatGPT will make a lot of money. And they'll make a lot of money out of the Māori data that they've got. And none of that money will go back to Māori. So that's a concern. The other concern is that ChatGPT works so well and the responses are so rapid and it's quite cheap, like it's free, people are going to use it. When I talk to these students, half of them were already using it. People are going to use it, and in terms of a Māori language activist, a lot of people are going to use it for te reo Māori. And they're going to use it so much that sooner or later our language is going to start to shift. And it'll be ChatGPT that's controlling our language, not our traditional holders of the language. So that's kind of concerning as well, but as Brian, you mentioned, I'm a computer scientist. I kind of like to look in the good in computer science, and I actually think there's an opportunity for us to take this tool as it is and then repurpose it on some data that we have control of, some Māori language data that we have control of. And normally from a Māori perspective, you don't give it Māori data, you give it iwi-related data. So we could potentially take this tool and have it talking to us from a Maniapoto dialect, or from a Ngāti Porou dialect, or from a Tai Tukarau dialect. And if we fed it the right information, and again, from Māori data sovereignty, if we have sovereignty of our information and we feed this tool, we can cut this tool off so it's not sharing it with the rest of the world, or as it's important to Māori, to other Māori. If we can cut this tool off so that it's doing that, then we can really start to harness the power of AI for Māori. And I think that's possible. So that's it. 9 seconds. Kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koe i rangatira. So we've heard from our 4 panelists. Mike pointed out there's no bad robots, there's just bad apples. Amanda, we had the 3 C's, cuts, creation, and collaboration. And when she suggested that there might be prompt engineers, I thought, well, there's very often quite late engineers too. So it's better if we're on time. Nick encouraged us to be creatively scared, not deer in the headlights scared. ChatGPT is coming for everybody's jobs. Now, I always said that if I had my time again, I would either be a televangelist or a roofer. I think ChatGPT is probably going to be a televangelist before it's a roofer, so when I retrain, I'm going to do a trade. But those trades won't be safe forever. And Tataka, a fascinating perspective there on where these generative AI tools are getting their data from. As Nick said, we created ChatGPT. As Tataka said, we have also created ChatGPT in te reo. So we've got to consider all of those aspects of generative AI, which is what makes this topic scary, engaging, fascinating, optimistic, and scary. So we're going to start taking audience questions now. They're coming in thick and fast, so you're going to have to bear with me while I dig some glasses out, because, you know, I'm getting to that age. Oh, gosh, there's all sorts of go. Let's just start with a real lowball one then. Amanda, what is a prompt engineer?
Very good question. So if you have played around with ChatGPT, Bard, or any of the other tools that are available to do questions with using text to get a text output, you'll notice that not all outputs are the same. The quality of the output depends on how you prompt. And there are some good rules around it, like break up your question into parts, be very specific, get it to improve itself. And so you notice that there is a way to do that. So that's one side of prompt engineering. The other side is actually when you're building language models, so let's say perhaps a New Zealand-based language model, you can set different features within that language model as well. And it doesn't just live in the world of text, it can also be text to image, text to 3D, text to any other medium or modality, as they say in AI.
Thank you very much. So it's not just being on time. There you go. So this is a question that's been upvoted, and I can see why, and this is for all of you. There are 2 parts to it. The second part I'll come back to because it repeats other questions. How will rampant disinformation and individual narratives created by large language models affect social social cohesiveness.
I'd like to vote Nick on that one.
Nick, you've been upvoted. Social cohesiveness in the face of...
Well, anyone who tells you they know does not know. So the most important thing about that is that question. And it's definitely going to have an effect that if you're asking that question, I bet you're looking in the right place. Don't look for me to reassure you. But I mean, well, how did social media affect social cohesiveness? In Mark Zuckerberg's fantasy world, it brought us all closer together. Not really what happened. So yes, I think generative AI asked the same questions. Be similarly suspicious.
Oh. Amanda's been remiked.
I'm being remiked.
Would anybody else like to jump in there in terms of social cohesiveness?
Yeah, I could build on your answer there and say, if we look back in history at the big scandals we've had with technology, for example, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where our preferences were nudged in certain directions due to a technology that we didn't even know existed, most of us back then. So my concern is that we don't even know how AI will impact social cohesiveness. It's very likely to have an impact that we cannot comprehend at this point in time.
And I would concur with that. We don't know what it's going to do in the future. It's an unknown.
So, in terms of social cohesiveness, I think it's always important to meet people face to face. So I think technology has taken that away, and if we can find opportunities to still meet people face to face, be the audience in the room listening to live speakers, the Māori saying is kanohi ki te kanohi, rai ki te rai, tinana ki te tinana, so just face to face. So I think one avenue, as well as what's been said about having that ability to question what you're seeing and what you're hearing and what you're believing, is to find avenues to meet face to face. I think that's quite important.
The second part of that question, and echoed in another couple of questions actually, is it possible for regulation to stay ahead of the exponential growth in the abilities of these models? And indeed, just the bland question, in what ways do you think AI should or indeed could be legislated? Yeah.
No.
No?
I don't think it's possible for regulation to
couldn't.
stay ahead because we're not sure of the impacts. It's like when they first built the motor cars, then they decided to, well, let's have speed limits and let's drive on one side of the road. We're not sure what are the impacts, so we can't build regulations because we're speculating. So really we have to have a few accidents, we have to kill a few pedestrians, and then, okay, this isn't a good thing. But I think that once we understand some of the true impacts, then we should have the ability to regulate. And like, for example, in terms of AI, one of the issues we have with Māori data sovereignty is finding out where it got its data. If we could regulate AI systems to show us where you got your data, I think that would put a lot of brakes on things. So there are avenues in terms of regulation, but we're not quite sure yet what we need to regulate against. That's my thoughts.
With my Deputy Vice-Chancellor hat on, I would like to point out that the University of Waikato does not condone pedestrian accidents. Just getting ahead of that one.
No, so for the hardware stuff that you saw, there's already a lot of legislation that's coming out to prevent damage from, physical damage from robotics in particular. But for the digital world, which seems to be a lot more sort of Wild Westy, I'm not sure that you can. But definitely for the robotics side of it, we're already working in that area, and there's already a lot of legality around what you can use and what you cannot use, and that's just going to that'll continue to grow.
Nick, and then
yes, I mean, I think it's hard to regulate a concept like AI, but it's definitely possible to regulate a company. And that's, I think, the major threat. It's what humans will do with these things. They're the ones who are incentivized to create these techs. Well, maybe because they make money out of them. And if you think that social media made billions, I don't know, this is much more transformative. Are we going to see the world's first trillionaires? Now, I think we have power over that if we choose to, or we could just let them get richer.
My biggest concern when it comes to regulation is the possibility to inhibit innovation in ways that we really need help. We've got a big climate crisis right now, and we need really smart tools to deal with that. But on the other hand, I think the scariest thing that we do need to regulate against is personal information. So right now, if you are using tools like ChatGPT and you're putting that information into the model, it will specifically tell you that that information will be used for the model's training, which means that if you work in an organization and you're putting human resource information or any proprietary information into the model, it can be sucked in there. So I think that what we need in terms of regulation is to have the ability to be forgotten and to allow these models to forget us when we request it.
It's an interesting idea. The idea of being forgotten by the internet is quite appealing. I should imagine there's a whole bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds out there who really wish the internet would forget them. Building on Tataka's point there about regulating and understanding where the data has come from, it's an interesting illustration, actually, of data sovereignty across the board. Now, how many of you have had the experience where you've had a conversation in the coffee room at work, you're talking about Whittaker's chocolate, and it's talking about which is your favourite Whittaker's chocolate. Then you go home that evening and you're watching your cat videos on YouTube, and all the videos are being interspersed with adverts for Whittaker's chocolate. Well, how did it know? How did it know that you discussed Whittaker's chocolate? That's data sovereignty. It's understanding how what you say to people is taken from you and given to somebody else, so you lose control of your own data sovereignty. And that part, I think, if we could ask, where is the data coming from? Where did all of that korero come from? That's an interesting insight into these generative models. So we'll see what's possible. As you might imagine, several questions coming up around jobs and the impact of AI on jobs. So we'll have some of those next. How do we retrain fast enough? Like, how do I become a roofer fast enough and at scale necessary to ensure that we don't end up with widespread social? So you said 19% of jobs susceptible to being replaced or already replaced. Gone.
50% of the tasks and 19% of jobs.
There you go. So these jobs are already going. Are we keeping ahead of it? Are we creating prompt engineers promptly enough, or do we have to? I'm sorry, I just can't let that go. Are we keeping ahead of that wave?
Well, the technology companies we're dealing with, and also if you look at the apple growers, they're all desperate for people who understand this technology. There's a massive shortage. So you can go from a relatively low-skill position to having a high-skilled, high-value position, because there just aren't enough people who understand the skills, and they're going to go through the industry very quickly, as long as the skilled people can keep up with it. So there is a great opportunity for people. It's not all a threat, it's actually an opportunity.
This is one of the most exciting times to ever be alive, because we have access to information at our fingertips, and it is created in a way that we can access and absorb like we've never imagined before. We have YouTube, we have a whole world of information now. So I think that there is a role to play in the individual to upskill and take a proactive approach. I also think there is a role of universities to play to prepare people for this new world, but also there's a role for organizations, and particularly for executives, to understand this big, new, brave world that we're entering into, and to take on the job of setting guardrails and upskilling in that area as well.
That leads very nicely, actually, onto a question that somebody's asked here. The realignment of our human workforce in manual labour type activities creates a huge opportunity for the education sector. The question here is, what is the University of Waikato doing to respond and prepare for that opportunity to uplift our community? So, university lecturers, what are you doing?
I thought this would be one for you, Bryony.
No, I'm DVC-R.
Well, we're certainly doing. I mean, if you look at the degree programs in engineering, we've expanded. We've got software engineering, we've got mechatronics, we've got artificial intelligence programs, we've got an AI institute. I mean, we're really right in the, as you saw from the research that we showed you, we're right in the thick of it to create the talent pipeline for the future. But it's a very slow pipeline to get going, but it's on the way. So we're doing what we can in that area.
Just supporting Mike, we have the AI Institute. We actually have a whole bunch of research projects coming in, and we don't have the people for them. We don't have the students for them, in particular Māori students. So there's a whole bunch of opportunities that are happening, and it's kind of an exciting area for computer science. So if you're going to choose a degree, I think computer science is a good choice right now.
Philosophy.
There's a couple of questions that build on that, so I'm going to ask you to reflect more on this, because ChatGPT any generative AI, not just ChatGPT, any generative AI in the context of education is both opportunity and challenge for educators. So do you think that teachers, those that do you think teachers that discourage the use of ChatGPT because of issues about cheating and plagiarism, do you think they should stop discouraging it and lean in and start encouraging it? And if so, how long should we wait before we start doing that?
Can I say on that? Because I actually, my students, they say, what about ChatGPT? I said, go for gold. If you can use it to improve your projects, then do it. I think people who are scared of it are not teaching correctly. And I think you've got to challenge the way you're teaching. And that's the way I operate. And what we've seen is, the students who are using it and using their own creativity, combining it, they're coming out with some great results.
I mean, I think that's exactly right, and I think it's a great opportunity, but in education. But it's sort of like, if you notice that ChatGPT, a bot, is doing something, well, teach the kids to do something a bit different. Tell them to use it, but don't teach them to just do that. So in a way, there are loads of opportunities. I mean, kids come to school with imaginations, and one thing that we know about ChatGPT, it has no imagination. ChatGPT is limited by the text we gave it. It cannot imagine beyond that. It can sort of extrapolate beyond it. It's never going to write Jane Austen because she sat down and sort of had a mad, crazy idea and wrote a book. So if we focused on that, if ChatGPT is doing something, well, you teach your students to use it, but don't teach them to just do that because, well, ChatGPT is doing it.
It's a fantastic example I'm going to bring Titaka in here, because he just spoke at the Auckland Writers' Festival on this exact topic.
So I totally agree. I think we should encourage students to use it as teachers. I think we should be expecting or guiding our students to be using it, and then looking at, what does that mean in terms of testing and evaluation. I think there are some fears, and some of them are quite grounded fears. I remember when calculators first came out, and the mathematician says we shouldn't get people to use calculators because their cognitive ability to do long arithmetic will be lost. And they were right. I mean, people can't add or subtract so much anymore because they don't need to, because they use a calculator. So I think the fear of our cognitive abilities changing are real, but people still use calculators. I use a calculator myself. I don't need to. I need to add small numbers. I don't need to add big numbers again. So I think it's in a similar way, using a generative AI that generates text, we may lose some of our cognitive abilities to produce that text, but people are still going to use it anyway. Our children, like half of the children that I saw, a couple of weeks ago, were using it anyway. So let's encourage them. Let's figure out how we can use it. In terms of, so I was part of a panel that gave a talk about could AI write a book a couple of weeks ago at the Auckland Writers' Festival, and it was kind of a stupid question, could AI write a book? Because of course it can write a book. The real question should be, what kind of book can AI write? And you can't, there's kind of like, it's like how long is a piece of string? Because the kind of book that AI can write like today is going to be quite different than the kind of book that it can write a year from now or 6 months from now or even 1 or 2 months from now. And some of the examples in the Writers' Festival, people were saying, well, yeah, I tried it out a couple of weeks ago, and this is what it's produced. And I felt like saying, try it out again now. I bet you it's a bit different. But that's the speed that this technology can work. And yeah, I think that we should just need to be aware of it. And yeah, I'd encourage its usage. But I'm skeptical about its usage in Te Reo Māori because of those 3 issues, really. Language shift, Māori data sovereignty, and then the financing behind it, really.
I think it's so important that we do teach it because of 3 key things as well, building on what these great points that have already been said. But if we're not taught about the limitations of these tools, then we're going to run into real trouble, because there are 3 things that these generative AI tools do. The first one is they hallucinate. That's a fancy way of saying confidently bullshits. You know, it's 100% confident, but not always correct. The second one is it's built on toxic and biased internet data. So when you build it on that garbage in, garbage out, you're going to get biased information and toxic things that you might not even realize is coming out there. So if you ask Bing Chat, for example, to create an image of a computer scientist for you, it's very likely to create a middle-aged white man. You know, that's just what it does. And then the third issue is copyright and IP issues. You might be using it to create a blog post or an essay, or even create a report to use in a corporate setting. And that information is not yours. Often it's going to be someone else's words, someone else's ideas. So I think those 3 guardrails need to be taught, and there'll be new ones as it evolves. But if we're not teaching it, people are going to run into problems.
Thank you, Amanda. That brings us to a question that I'm very pleased somebody asked, because if you hadn't, I would have done. I'm not scared about ChatGPT for the reasons that have been mentioned here. I am scared about that last reason, or the second to last reason you mentioned there. The bias inherent in the data that exists on the internet is informing how generative AI works. You only need to look at simple data statistics around the women, for example, how crash test dummies are all men. Crash test dummies are men, cars are safe for men, they're not safe for women. That data doesn't exist, so how can generative AI be anything other than sexist? So, for the 4 of you, how do we combat the biased data that is creating this artificial intelligence?
I have some ideas, but I just didn't want to hog the talking stick, so to speak. I think, firstly, tools like ChatGPT have a really nice thing built in, which is reinforcement learning. And this is your ability to say to the model, you've been built on all of this information, but I want you to respond in specific ways. And you might even have a constitution, which is what other language models use. These are the things you're not allowed to say, and this is what you are. So you can almost have 2 language models talking to each other before it produces an output for you to make sure it's doing what you want it to do from an ethical perspective. And so it's for that reason that if you ask ChatGPT how to create a bomb, for example, it shouldn't give you an answer because it has that kind of constitution built in. And I think the second way as well is that you can choose the sample that goes into these models. Instead of just going for massive data sets, you can also increase what you want and decrease what you don't want. And thirdly, you have a diverse set of people building the models because they might just realize that there is bias in there and stop it before it gets out into the world.
And I think that goes almost right back to the first question where we said, where is it going to go? And it was going, well, we don't really know. And I think it's going to go on its own journey. It'll start off as a Wild West, and then it will start to have constraints because of the biases that are already in there. And yeah, I completely agree with Amanda on that one.
I mean, it's maybe I can be the pessimist here, but
we would expect nothing less. No?
If Elon Musk gets control of this, which he wants to, so right now, ChatGPT is quite well behaved because it's got guardrails. And when they introduced it, they thought, gosh, we can't have this thing that's spouting too much sexist, racist nonsense because otherwise that's bad publicity. So they did a really good job of putting guardrails around this. Elon Musk wants a competitor, a competing generative AI that is not woke. And look at what that will do when he releases that. That will say anything, any of the rubbish that is on the internet, that will amplify that. Because there's a business model behind that. I mean, the business model is give the people what they want and what they pay for, and it's often that. So, yeah, abolish Elon Musk first.
Again, the University of Waikato position. Changing tack a little bit here to something that's slightly less scary. Amanda, you made mention of the application of generative AI tools to tackling the big, wicked problems like climate change. So maybe all of you could elaborate on how we might use artificial intelligence to tackle something like climate change. But as an aside to that, somebody else has very sensibly asked the question, what is the carbon footprint of AI? So.
I'm not sure how AI would target climate change. I think if there was an easy answer, we would have it straight out in front of us. Yeah, I'd have to do a bit of checking and do a bit of research to try and figure that out. And yeah, in terms of the carbon footprint, I'm not sure what that is too either, but I can't imagine it'd be particularly healthy. So these are important considerations.
Any other thoughts? Amanda, you made the comment about climate change. How do you see it helping?
So there has been huge progress, and in fact some of it has come from the AI Institute here at Waikato, using models to predict how changes are taking place and what proactive measures we can do in that space. But I think that requires a whole talk on its own, so I'll pause it for now and go to the other question, which is what is the climate impact? And it's huge. These language models, to build them, it was a huge, it came at a huge cost in terms of climate costs. And the computing that we do does come at a cost as well, just when we're using it. But my biggest concern is if we continue to keep building these models, that's only going to continue to cause that issue. But if we use what we've got, it's not so expensive just to use it, it's that training that takes months of training with a huge server to build the language models that we're using at present day. So there are some estimates that suggest it's like to build something like ChatGPT 3.5, it's like taking a flight from New Zealand to Los Angeles, back to New Zealand and back to Los Angeles, and that's, you know, the carbon cost of building that model.
So there's a few questions here that are sort of related. Just for clarity, most people are choosing to submit their questions anonymously, so it could just be one of you asking all of these questions, for all I know. I get a sneaking suspicion that this one might be the same anonymous. Could AI create code to advance AI, to create even more advanced AI, to the point of AI domination, followed a few questions later by, in all seriousness, what are the chances of a Skynet scenario?
Well, I'll start on the skeptic on this one. So I think this is, I mentioned in my little talk there about that Archie wasn't conscious and it's not sentient. Mm-hmm. We are so far away from that I think, you know, this at the moment you can just put your minds at rest. This is fatal, isn't it? I'll do it next week now I said that. You don't have to worry about it. I'd like to just give one quick analogy on this. If you think about flight, and you go back to 1903 and the Wright brother did the flight, then 1969 we got people on the moon, and you go, right, if we extrapolate, we'll be teleporting to Mars by 2023. We're not. We have got to a point where, you know, we've maxed out that technology and we're wondering where the next big thing is. And I think you're going to get something like this with this technology. We're so far from understanding our own intelligence, let alone artificial intelligence, to make that something that that will be sentient and conscious like Skynet, that I think the evidence just isn't there at the moment. What we have is core data-driven machines that are helping us do things that we couldn't do before. And I think that, so I'm not worried about Skynet. It's not conscious yet.
Yeah.
Nick?
No, but I mean, maybe worry a little about Skynet, because why not? I mean, it's a worrying world. But I mean, if Skynet is going to happen, it's not going to be built out of anything like ChatGPT, which has no capacity to do any of that. It can write your essay for you, but I mean, and if Arnold Schwarzenegger and the TU-800 turned up and just wrote everyone's essays, that wouldn't have been the movie that it was, would it? But, so that's all generative AI on large language models are really good wordsmiths, but yes, they're not going to nuke you. Something else might. So.
Yeah, I think the fear of AI sells. And I think that's what's happening a little bit at the moment.
Yeah.
Because people are afraid of it, it's become a big news topic, and we have evenings like this, for example. But yeah, I agree with I think it's far, far away at the moment. I think it's really quite unrealistic.
But last year, would you have thought it was unrealistic to be having a conversation with ChatGPT that, much as it's not sentient, feels sentient? I've had way dumber conversations with people who I know are sentient. just saying. A few last quick questions, maybe, since we're coming to the end of our time. And there's a ton of questions. I do apologise if I didn't get to your question. There's so many interesting questions here, and we could keep this going all night, but I appreciate people have lives. We've all heard you all four mention the term guardrails. Who determines the guardrails? Who is ultimately the censor for AI?
So that's what Māori data sovereignty is about, having sovereignty over your data. And with this, the sovereignty of this data is with these overseas companies that are producing these tools, which is where we need to turn it around. You know, people who own the data should have control over their data, and they're not at the moment. So.
I mean, the guardrails that currently exist are really well designed for the purposes of OpenAI, which is to avoid bad publicity and nothing more. So yes, Spirit does a really good job of not denying the Holocaust and all of that stuff. But if you want the guardrails that Te Taka's calling for, they're completely different things. And I don't think OpenAI has any interest in producing those. They'll have to come from you.
Yeah, that's a hard question because AI is unlike other things that we've experienced and that we've regulated. Same with data, which is it's a global issue. If someone makes a model in San Francisco, it will impact us here in New Zealand. You know, just last week, Japan said, you know what, go for your life, build what you want in terms of what data you put into your language models. There's no copyright. We don't worry about copyright when we build those models. So it's a very difficult question. I think it's going to require a combined effort. And I think having the population involved to make those decisions, a representative population could be a really nice way to start. And it would have to be a global effort, not a small effort from little individual groups and pockets of society.
Yeah, I agree.
So we are coming to the end of our time. What I'll do is use one last question here as a framing to invite a final comment for each of you. Now, we've heard about AI being scary. We've heard that we should be creatively scary. Somebody asked if they're creatively scary as parents, would you encourage your children to be a roofer or a computer scientist? But I think that's a bit loaded, so we won't go there. We've heard optimism, and we've heard we don't need to worry about it just yet. So I'll ask you each for a final comment, but possibly reflecting on what is it that you personally find scary about AI. Te Taka.
So my passion is Māori language, so it's quite scary how quickly this tool has adopted and been able to speak the Māori language so fluently, and in a manner that has not had control. But like, I'm not so much scared as kind of excited, because it's like, okay, well, if that's what it can do with data, that it's stolen or misappropriated, what can it do with data that is appropriate? And it's data that's a lot deeper and a lot more iwi specific. So it's kind of scared, but like really excited about some of the possibilities that it can do. You know, that it can change a bunch of frontiers for Māori language, Māori knowledge, propagation throughout, you know, Māori histories, Māori families. So it's scared, but like really excited about the future if we can harness it.
Roller coaster scared.
Yeah.
Nick.
Yes, I think it's, we're going to be living in a world with these technologies, so there's no avoiding that, and they have great aspects. But I think, basically, if we just think creatively about what we are, let's avoid just doing what they do, and let's do something different, because we are so much more than ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a brilliant, dazzling wordsmith that never thinks a single thought. And we think loads of thoughts, and we think of all the wonderful ways we can be human in a future with ChatGPT, which is our slave. I mean, you know, we can enslave ChatGPT. It's a machine, and we should treat it like that.
Kira, Nick, Amanda.
My biggest concern is that seeing is no longer believing. Mm-hmm. Now with deep fakes, you cannot trust an image, you cannot trust a video, you cannot trust audio, and you cannot trust what you see on social media as being fact anymore. In fact, people can very rarely tell the difference between what's generated through AI and what is created by humans. Mm. And this has huge propensity for harm, and that is what concerns me the most.
Mm. And I think, going back to what you said about you've had conversations with with ChatGPT that were conscious, the potential is sort of similar to this, that fake humans that have no intelligence, no conscious, no sentient, that people are sort of trapped into believing that they're having a relationship with the machine, and it's completely fake, and it's not real, and they're being duped, tricked, and I think that is going to happen, and I think that's a sad state of affairs. And it goes back to what Nick said about keeping your humanity and making sure that you deal with real people, because that, unfortunately, I think that will happen.
Thank you. I probably should have asked them to end on a more positive note, thinking about it. So I will now end on a more positive note. I think we're on the cusp of a very, very exciting world, and you know what gives me most faith and most hope that we are going to go in the right direction in the end is people like our panelists here, who are thoughtful, intelligent, educated individuals who bring their humanity to these conversations, and people like yourselves who come along to listen and engage in that conversation too. This crowd here lets me know that we're going to be okay. This isn't artificial intelligence, this is the real sort. So, all that remains, actually, I do apologise, I should have done this at the start. Look, see, I forgot that, and I forgot that bit, and forgot that bit, sorry. And this is where we end. So all that remains really is for me to thank our panelists, tēnā koe rangatirama, wonderful conversation, thoroughly enjoyed your input. And tēnā koutou, thank you all, ngā mihi nui kia koutou to yourselves as well. Keep your eyes peeled to our events page. These aren't on any particular schedule, but we pop up from time to time. Hopefully you've enjoyed yourselves, and please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you.